Hey friends, welcome back to The Return Project. Life has a way of knocking us down, pulling us off track, and leaving us in a place we never planned to be. But here's the truth. Those very moments become the foundation for our greatest returns. Our mission is to become the beacon of hope, a light in the dark, and to walk beside those searching for a way out. Every guest we bring to this space proves that no matter how deep the darkness, there's always a light. There's always a hand extended, showing the way through. This podcast is about resilience, redemption, and transformation, moving from the lows to the highs, from the darkest valleys to the breakthrough that changes everything. I'm your host, Bryan White, and this is The Return Project. In today's episode, we have the pleasure of sitting down with someone who I've actually had the pleasure of knowing for quite a while now. We get to sit down with Esther Hudson. She's going to share her incredible story of overcoming, adapting, and conquering. She's traveled the world of recovery and had many experiences that, even from what I've had the opportunity to learn, just leave me in a space of awe that she's been able to transform her life and bring her into the world that she's in now, travel through the seasons and become the person that she is today. So Esther, it's so great to have you here. It's a pleasure to talk to you again.
Thank you so much for that introduction, Bryan. I really appreciate it.
Esther, in the time we've known each other, I had the wonderful opportunity of getting to work with you for a little bit and learn pieces of your story. But I'm really excited today and honored for the opportunity for you to take us down the rabbit trail of your story and how you walked through your life, adapting, overcoming, and conquering the many things that you have. So I'd love to pass you the floor and let you share with our audience and uplift us how you've come to the space you are today.
Thanks, Bryan. It's an honor to be here and to share my story. So I'll start with childhood. I grew up in a very unconventional home. My parents had 14 children. Very religious household. We were raised with good values and morals. I was taught, things like integrity and honesty are important in family. So while I was taught all of those things, home life was also a battleground. So what people didn't see was what was going on behind closed doors. And, in my family, we were taught to keep secrets, and those secrets made us sick. In my recovery, I've learned to be honest and open, despite how hard it might be. Vulnerability is a strength. Growing up in that kind of atmosphere, where you're being taught these things, like these values and these morals and these beliefs, but they don't match what someone's actions are. It's very confusing. And that was the life that I had growing up. So, I went through a lot of trauma as a kid. There was a lot of abuse in our home. But by the age of 4 years old, I moved to Red Deer. And it was during that time in my life where things really kind of started to spiral out of control for me. I didn't have coping skills. I didn't know how to handle the trauma and the loss and the hardships that would soon come to me. So I was sexually abused from the age of 4 to 14. That was a big secret that I kept for a long time. And the shame that came with that and the confusion was something that haunted me. 2 of my siblings went through it alongside me. And, I don't think any child should have to go through that. And so not only that, but we also experienced a lot of other abuses in our family. And we watched our older siblings going through addictions and mental health issues and this whole vast array of problems. And we couldn't talk to anyone about it. I was taught that like the RCMP, social services, they're evil. That, nobody outside should know anything about our family except for the good things. So I would go to church on Sunday and smile and look like this poster child for perfection, but it wasn't that way. Around the age of 14, I finally got the courage to go to the police and speak out about what was going on. I was removed from the home, placed in the care of one of my older siblings for a bit. My parents left town. They changed their email. They changed their phone number. I had no way to contact them. They were just gone. And it stayed that way for a long time. And, I was very, very dependent on my parents. We were sheltered. I was homeschooled till grade 9. Just no skills, no social skills, coping skills, no really anything. I was very dependent and very sheltered, with this belief that the outside world is dangerous and scary. So, being out there on my own at 14 was a lot. Me and my sister and my brother, Sam, we all ran away. And, my parents signed over custody, and it was a lot of mixed feelings. In a way, it felt like a betrayal to me. And, it just this heaviness, right? Like of everything I had been through, I didn't know how to carry it. And that's when I tried alcohol for the first time. One of the core feelings that I had growing up was that I didn't fit in, I didn't belong, and that I was different from everyone around me. That's something that most alcoholics and addicts, I believe, can relate to. That feeling of we don't belong and not worth it. That was another thing growing up in a religious household was I never felt like I was worthy. That message was drilled into my head so much, like, unless I'm perfect, I'm not worthy. So I battled that. And when I had a drink, it was like a magical potion. It took away all of that. It didn't matter if I fit in, didn't matter the pain, none of it. But that was only for a moment. And then when I sobered up, it was back. And with it came problems, So I continued that. That became my coping mechanism, I would drink and smoke weed. Within a very short time frame, I was introduced to meth. And that was kind of where my life really took off and started to become this chaotic mess. I didn't see it that way though. Because for me, I felt like a cockroach. When you grow up in Cockroach City, it doesn't really matter. Addiction doesn't seem to matter. It's all the same. It was always chaotic for me. So what difference did it make if I was using? So I started to use hard drugs and it went from weekend use to daily use. I was put into public school. Again, that feeling of not fitting in, not belonging. I hung out with the outcasts, with the stoners. It was around this time that my sister that ran away with me, she attempted suicide and ended up in the hospital. And again, more trauma, right? More things that I didn't know how to carry. And so meth was my solution. And I bounced around from sibling house to sibling house and they didn't really know what to do with me. I was this traumatized kid that was acting out and they didn't know how to help. They tried, but they didn't know how to help. Growing up, I had been told that my older siblings were the devil's followers because they had left and weren't practicing the religion. So there was this separation between me and them. There was just me, Jesse, and Sam. And in my head, that's just how it was. Trying to get to know my older siblings was a challenge for me. I didn't know how to let anyone in. I didn't know how to show my true self. I didn't feel like I even liked my true self. I didn't even know who I was, to be honest. I had all these values and morals that I was supposed to have, but I didn't know who I actually was, what was forced on me and taught to me or what was actually me, So I started to live into trap houses and sleep on, different friends' couches that were into the scene. My siblings couldn't really handle me. By 17, I was living on the streets now and then, kind of couch surfing still at this point. I ended up graduating high school. I think that's a memorable thing is that I graduated high school while I was on drugs. I'm not sure how I did it, but I did. Right after I graduated high school at 18, I became homeless for the first time, actually homeless, living in the bush homeless. That was a whole different world for me. There was a freedom there that I didn't have growing up that I'd always, in a way, lacked. So most people in my family were saying this should be her rock bottom. But for me, it wasn't. I genuinely liked being homeless. That sounds crazy, but it was true. I liked the freedom. I liked not having to answer to anyone. And I liked being able to do whatever I wanted. And, I spent quite a while on the streets, living in the bush here in Red Deer, staying at the shelters here. That became normal to me. Learned the ways of the streets from my baby daddy. It was during this time I got pregnant. And here I was, this pregnant, homeless drug addict. And, so far from what I'd been taught was right. And, I was pretty disappointed in myself. But I didn't really know how to stop. I didn't really know if I wanted to stop. My baby daddy convinced me that we should have this baby. We could do it. And I remember after finding out I was pregnant, this is the reality of being homeless, right? People in the community treated me like absolute shit. And, I had my tent dragged across the highway by people in the community. I had garbage thrown at me. I had people say nastiest things about me. One of the nights I literally found a shovel. We found some oil and potatoes and we cooked potatoes on a shovel. And that was the best damn meal I've ever had. So, I was in survival mode for sure. I ended up getting a hand up. My baby daddy's mom was come live with us when I was just about to have my baby. She moved us up to Edmonton. And I will add that it was during my time staying in the shelters that I started to feel like maybe I did have some worth. And it was because the workers there, they didn't care that I was using. They didn't care that I was homeless or that I was pregnant. They didn't judge me. They didn't look down on me, connected with me. And for the first time, I feel like I actually started to really connect with someone. And so that kind of is what inspired me to maybe get off the streets, maybe I can do this. Maybe I can have this baby. Maybe I'm not so bad after all. Cause I just had this inherent belief that I was bad, that I was not good. So I got a place in Edmonton. The place was full of cockroaches. It was my first place with the baby. And again, I didn't know how to handle it. So I used again. And that was a big part of shame and guilt for me when I first got sober was that, I couldn't sober up for my child. The love I had for him was not enough. Despite how much I wanted it to be, it wasn't. I thought he was the answer to all of my struggles. I thought he would make everything better. And that's a lot of weight to put on a child. I relapsed several times during my pregnancy. I used almost constantly, to be honest. And then when I had my baby, I went back to using. We ended up moving, getting out of that place with the cockroaches. But, I numbed and I ran away from my feelings and the struggle by using. We got into a new place and I'm like, this will fix it all. Like, this will make me feel better. But it wasn't, because I was someone that used alcohol and drugs for everything, any sort of emotions. I did not know how to be a normal human being anymore. In a way, it was animalistic. It was how I survived. Drugs and alcohol were the solution to everything. I was celebrating if I was upset, if I was angry. That was what I did. And so I had the threat of social services coming and taking my son away. So we made a plan, and my fiance at the time decided with me that we were going to separate for a little bit. I was going to go to Calgary, live with my sister, and sober up, right? That was the plan. And I really had that intention to do that. I moved to Calgary, sobered up for about a month. The longest I've ever been able to stay sober was a month. Sobered up for a month. And then I went back out. And I was so terrified of losing my kid that I actually blocked my fiance on everything and made it so that he had no way to get in contact with me. And I went back out. And this time I brought my kid with me. So I'm visiting trap houses and I'm doing all this, and I have my little child in tow with me. And a common trend that I've seen is that a lot of people lose their children in their addiction. And I, by the grace of God, did not lose my kid. I managed to keep him throughout my addiction. And I truly believe that if I hadn't kept him, I would have spiraled even worse and I'd probably be dead. So, but some higher power knew was looking out for me. But at the same time, it comes with a double-edged sword, because I put him through a lot. And as a result, he went through a lot of trauma, right? So I passed my trauma down to him and continued that intergenerational trauma that happened to my parents and they passed down to me, right? So, in 2016, my oldest brother, who I was estranged from, his name is Devin, he passed away from an overdose. And that's when my parents came back into my life. It was around the funeral. I didn't know how to handle it. I brought a new guy I was seeing to the funeral, my drug buddy, basically. And we fought at the funeral. That was something that right there in front of my brother's casket, how the amount of shame I felt after that, like, who am I? And my brothers were always there for me, always protecting me, looking out for me. So it felt like just such a degrading thing for me to do. I used that as my excuse to spiral even further down into my addiction. And that's when I started to use down. Something I swore I would never do. And that only continued until risk being found out. So I had this whole facade going on that I was sober. I was lying to everyone. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to really pretend that I'm sober now, because I'm so scared of losing my kid. It's just, things had spiraled so bad. I ended up staying with that guy that I brought to the funeral. We were in a very toxic, abusive relationship. I moved out of his house 30 times in 1 year. So that's telling you something. Like, that's insanity. But I didn't see it at the time. I didn't think it was insane. I enrolled into school for addictions. So this is funny, because I enrolled in school for addictions because I thought, this is a great cover. No one will know that I'm still using if I'm taking school for addictions. So I went to school. I remember giving a whole speech and I was high during the speech, and everybody was clapping and I was like, I don't even know what I just said. I talked about my recovery journey in that speech, just the balls that I had to do that, And that's the thing too. I thought I was fearless when I was on drugs and alcohol, right? But I really wasn't. It was actually like cowardly. I was actually a coward, It was false courage, right? So in 2020, things started to really spiral. It was getting worse and worse. 19 CFS did get involved. They stepped in. My son went to school, told his teacher that he was scared that I was going to die, either from my boyfriend killing me or from drug overdose or alcohol poisoning. And, CFS stepped in. And I will say they were amazing. They helped me a lot. I didn't see it at the time. I was so resentful and angry. I didn't want them to be in my life. I didn't want to lose my kid. That was my biggest fear. But the thing is like, even though they were there, they stepped in and started having these chats with me and investigating and all that. I still could not stop. I remember telling my family that, I'm done with alcohol. I'm done with all that. I'm done. And that night I got loaded and came back home. And they were like, so in 2020, July, I came to Red Deer for a visit, and it kind of really went off the handle. I said I was done. I promised my sister in Calgary I was quitting. She knew about CFS being involved and told her I was done. And I went to Calgary or Red Deer and I got loaded, and I went downtown and I ended up running into my baby daddy, and everything came like crashing down around me. Like, I just realized, like, what have I become? Like, I'm a liar. I've treated him so horribly. Like, the one person that actually really loved me, and like, he didn't hold any hate towards me either. He just wanted to be in my life. Right. So we talked things out, made a plan for him to come back home. I needed to get sober. And, I admitted it. I started admitting things and got back to my sisters in Red Deer and kept drinking and ended up yelling at like my father figure, my brother-in-law, who had taken on like a father role for me. I freaked out on him while he was having a stroke. And I didn't know he was having a stroke, but I completely lost it. I blacked out. I don't fully remember what I all did, but I know it was really, really bad. And I'd never treated him that way before. And he ended up in the hospital, and like that tore me apart, that I had behaved like that and that he was in the hospital now and, in a really bad state, and, he would later in my recovery pass away, from this, that really got to me. And I think it was when I kind of shattered that illusion that, I wasn't able to connect with anybody really. I didn't know how to have friends. I was lying to so many people and to myself that I couldn't connect. I had that barrier there, I connected with Sam, my brother, but that was only because he knew, right? He was part of that. We were both stuck in that addiction together. So I got honest. I got home and I was like, why can't I quit? I feel so powerless. Like I can't stop. And I got a call that night, and I believe this is divine intervention. I got a call from one of my siblings that night, and she told me, Esther, I'm an alcoholic and I recently relapsed, but I'm getting back up. I'm going back into my recovery community. And that was when I admitted the first time, like truly admitted everything, told her everything. I said, I've been lying to everyone. I have not been sober all these years. She's like, we knew. Everyone knew. Like, it's obvious. And then I sought out recovery. I've stayed sober since. It's not been without its hardships. I believe that was the first step of my new life. So again, I had a pattern, like I said earlier, of relapsing after a month sober. And I was at my 1 month sober when my baby daddy was killed by a drunk driver, and he was on his way home at the time to me. So, it was this moment of like pure desperation that I felt like, I don't know. It was this choice that I had to make. Like I could go back out, do what I've always done. I could go use again to numb this. This is how I've always dealt with pain, right? This is how I've always dealt with hardships. I could go back out and do the same thing, or I could do something different. I could really lean in. I could surrender. I could trust my higher power. I could try this recovery thing. I could lean on others. And that's what I did. And it was extremely hard, but I did it. And I took it one day at a time, one step at a time. And I got through it. And then a few months later, my brother-in-law, who was in the hospital still, was in a vegetative state. I went and made amends to him for my behavior. And even though he was in a vegetative state, it was after I made my amends that he actually spoke. There was other people in the room to witness this. I took this as I was forgiven. I'd been carrying that weight so much in my early sobriety. He told me, I love you and it's okay. And then he passed away the next day. And I believe that was his way of helping me be free of that. Like, I was doing the right things and I was able to be free of holding on to that. So I continued on my recovery journey, and it's 2 years sober when my second brother died of an overdose. He left behind children, and he was someone that I was quite close with. His name is David. The depression came on. I didn't know how to handle this. One loss after another. I was just starting to heal from the other two deaths that I'd recently went through. And then my other brother's trying to address that. And then I lose David too. And just this overwhelming like pain. And, my mentor in sobriety, she told me that the way I was going to get through it was I was going to go and serve others. And I thought that was just like a bogus answer, but she was like, well, you're going to go and serve others. You're going to go look for ways you can be of help at his funeral so that you don't use. You're going to go comfort his children, and you're going to go and help. And it worked. It helped me get through it. I focused on other people. Addiction is very selfish. We only care about ourselves. And in recovery, I learned that giving back actually helps me. It is actually in serving others and giving to others, I'm helped, and it helps me to stay sober. It helps me in a lot of ways, it uplifts me. So I did that at the funeral, and she told me that people are going to be watching you. She said, they're going to be watching how you handle this, and your example might bring someone in your family to recovery. You never know, right? So the last night that we were there, my brother Sam comes outside and he asks me like, is it nice over there? And I was like, oh, it hurts sometimes, but so it's worth it. I was like, come into the light, man. Come to sobriety. It was that night that I ended up discussing recovery with him, and we walked inside holding hands, and that was kind of like his first steps into recovery. So again, my mentor was right that people were watching, and it did have an impact. My brother then went into detox. Well, he went into the hospital, then he went into detox and began his recovery journey alongside me. And, growing up, we'd always been so close. So this only further deepened our bond. My example of recovery and my change, like he saw it. He saw me at my lowest, and it inspired him to seek out recovery. We spent a whole year together, in recovery in the community, doing service work together, just bonding on a really, really deep level, a level that I had not experienced before. And, we had a lot of forgiveness. And remember, we attended this ceremony, and the lady there had said, like, she pointed at me in the crowd. It was like this spiritual thing we were at. And she pointed me out in the crowd and she said, little do you know, like, I was in a waiting period at this time in my life. I was struggling financially, going through like these issues. And I didn't understand why like my higher power was making me wait, why I was just stuck in this like limbo. And this lady called me out and she pointed at me and she said that I've probably been asking lately, like, why am I in this waiting period? And she was like, little do you know, like, there's a purpose for it. And she was like, the purpose is that person sitting beside you. And that was my brother, Sam. And she's like, your hearts are being healed. And, you know, you'll look back on this time and be so grateful for this year that you were waiting. Unbeknownst to me, my brother would die a year later. So she was completely correct on that. I trusted it and I really leaned into that experience. And I'm really grateful I did because it was like one of the best years in my recovery. You know, another thing that I'll add in is that my son was so traumatized. When I first came into recovery, he could barely speak. He didn't trust people. He would keep a huge distance. But when I got sober, he healed too. He like never stops jabbering now. Most amazing kid ever. You know, so he went through it all with me. We healed together. You know, it's healing from addiction is a family thing, right? It impacts everyone. And I've watched that, you know, so in 2020 or 2023, yeah, I ended up moving back to Red Deer. And I'd said I would never move back to my hometown, but my path just kept forcing me to go to Red Deer. And I didn't understand why, you know, my pillars in the community were telling me like, people are waiting there for you. You don't know, like, there are people there that you haven't met yet that will be impacted by you that you need to go there for. And I was like, okay, so I'm having all these barriers come up and everything is forcing me back home to Red Deer. And I really thought Red Deer was to blame for all my problems. So I did not want to go back. So I moved back to Red Deer. I started working in the addictions field and I had to leave Sam behind. Unfortunately, I couldn't bring him with me at the time. We had plans for him to eventually join me. But, you know, one of the things that he struggled with was being able to connect with a lot of people. You know, he didn't know how to let others in. And so I was one of the only people that he allowed really in. We were incredibly close, like almost codependent, to be honest. When I left, it was devastating for him and he did not know how to handle it. He didn't reach out and he picked up. Unfortunately, he overdosed and had an anoxic brain injury. And you know, that I would say that this was like a pivotal part in my recovery where like I was really face to face with like my deepest fear and like the hardest battle that I've ever went through. I was told that, you know, we had to make the decision as I was the closest person with Sam, you know, plus me, like, what are we going to do? You know, he was not going to recover. He was on life support, you know, so we took my brother off of life support. And, you know, that was really, really difficult for me. Someone actually told me before I made that decision, like love, like real, true love sometimes means letting go. It means that we care more about instead of our selfish ways that if we know that we need to let go of someone and that they'll be happier or pain free, like we let go. And like, that's been a constant theme in my recovery is like letting go, letting the universe take over. But like, it was incredibly difficult for me. You know, I took my brother off of life support and I watched him take his last breaths. And in a way, it was tragically beautiful. You know, had I been in my addiction, I would have never had the courage to face that or be with him. And what a way to honor our bond and his legacy than to hold him in my arms as he left this earth. You know, my mentor held my hand while I held my brother's and my son. You know, I was able to send my brother on his way, like at peace. One of the most memorable things is like, I actually left the hospital right as he was about to pass. And I thought I couldn't do it. I wanted to run away. I wanted to go relapse. I didn't think I could handle it. I waited outside for a while, figured he would be gone by now. And when I went back up, everyone had like created space for me in the hospital room. And they were like, he's been waiting for you. He won't go until you would come. And as soon as I held his hand, he started to pass on. So it was like, we were always each other's comfort. When I went through hard times, he was always my person. So to be able to give back to him in that way, like what a blessing. You know, it's such an honor to be able to express and show him, you know, the impact that he had in my life. You know, I believe that he was a big reason that I had so much resilience and was able to navigate life growing up and, you know, through my addiction, those connections, right? That they're so important. I believe that that's what carries us through those hard times, right? So he passed and I really struggled. I really, really struggled. My mental health took a nosedive and getting out of bed, even brushing my teeth was so freaking hard. I really wrestled with this idea, like, could I keep doing this for the rest of my life? Could I keep staying sober? Like, I really didn't know. But a month later, we had his funeral. And this is like the most impactful thing that was said to me was after we buried my brother, I took off and I was going to go relapse, right? My brother's sponsor stopped me. He ran after me and he like this tough love, like just this stern, like Esther, and like yelled my name. And I like froze. He was like, I know what you're about to go do. And I know that you think that's the answer. And he told me what I needed to hear and told it in such an honest way that it shook me. Like he told me that I was at a choice. I had a choice to make that I could go out there and relapse. And Sam's story is just this sad story. A brother relapsed and his sister couldn't handle it and she did too. And both were dead, And so people lost a brother and a sister. Or he said, I could do something different. He said, I could take Sam's love and legacy and how much he wanted to stay sober and the love he had for people and the impact he had on others. And I could carry it with me. He said, I could stay sober through it. And every time that I had the opportunity to share my story, I could share Sam's story. And that way my story wasn't just, it was Sam's story too, right? So whenever I share my story, I include Sam in it because Sam changed so many lives that he did not see. And if I can carry that forward and show people that it's possible to go through the most intense loss of your life and still not use drugs and alcohol, like that's what I did. I sat with the pain and I talked about it to other people and I got through it. And, today I am transformed because of it. I have learned over these last 4 years in recovery that it is connection to other people that will pull you through the darkest times, and that it's the raw, real, authentic connections. The crying is not weakness. It is in being vulnerable and being open and truthful about what is going on, as even though it might seem like a burden, it's not. Like that's how you connect with someone else, and that it's probably helping the person that's listening just as much as it's helping you. That's what I started to really get. I was sent so many people who kind of needed my support that actually ended up helping me. People that struggled and, like my brother's girlfriend who had never been to a funeral, and that's why I went, and it actually ended up helping me, but, I didn't realize it at the time. I've learned, the power of resilience and how that's fostered through those meaningful connections and being able to change your outlook on things, being able to reframe it, look for the silver linings, look for the lessons in the, in the struggle. And someone once told me a couple of years ago in my sobriety that I'm like a phoenix, that I had to walk through fire in order to get where I am today. And that is the truth. I have went through fire to get where I am today, and I refuse to give up. My hope and what I do daily is that I can make a difference in others' lives so that all of that struggle I went through isn't for nothing, and show people that they are never too far gone to get help. Because I truly believed I was too far gone. One other piece of really critical information is that when I was in addiction, I was told by my doctors that I would never overcome substance-induced psychosis, that I was going to permanently be like that. I was actually not well in the head. I actually believed my family was reptiles, so that I thought I could never recover from that. And now I will say I have been cleared. I'm actually mentally sane. Well, to a degree. I still have other mental health issues, but the psychosis is gone. And, I never would have thought that was possible. So my message to people that are listening is you are never too far gone. You can get through anything. Just reach out. You're not a burden. You don't have to struggle alone. No one is an island unto himself. We need each other. We are designed for connection and communities. That is what pulled me through the dark times, was my community, my connection to others, my higher power. I've reclaimed that part of myself, my spirituality. I meditate daily. I pray daily. Those are critical. That spiritual, social, emotional, mental, all of those are super important in building resilience. So if you're struggling and you feel alone, just know that you're not. And it doesn't matter what you've been through or how dark things might seem. There's always light at the end. And let me be a lighthouse for you and telling you that things get better. There is peace after loss. I thought that healing meant I was going to remove the pain. It's not true. I thought I was learning how to make space for the pain, and that's not actually what was happening. I was learning how to make space for joy and happiness. So as I healed, I learned how to carry both. I can carry the grief, the loss, the trauma, and I can carry the opposite, right? I have learned how to carry that depth. So just know you're not alone and reach out, reach out. You don't have to struggle through life and through these hardships. There are people out there who care about you and want to hear what.
Just say, I've had the opportunity to meet with people around the world and hear some incredible stories, but sitting here listening to your story is probably one of the most incredible stories of overcoming that I've had the honor of sitting through. I have no words you've actually got me a little worked up. I'm sitting here wow, the ability to overcome all of that and still rise like the phoenix. And on a bit of a humorous side, I kind of had to chuckle because as you were talking about the phoenix and I'm looking at your red hair going, yeah, she really is kind of like a phoenix. She's got the red hair and everything. But it is inspiring to know that there are people such as yourself that have such a heart to serve, but also that ability to uplift others through that. One of the areas I'd really love to dive ourselves a little bit into here is, how did you manage to grow your belief? You went from saying you had these really poor beliefs and you hadn't been taught the beliefs that you might have wanted instilled into you. How did you learn the new beliefs, and how did you really be able to instill those beliefs that you were able to take them from relearning them and using them and understanding them?
I would say it's like in early recovery, I started to like notice all these people that I wanted to be like, that I thought were inspirational, that were strong, all these traits that I was like, I tried to start modeling myself towards that. And, with my mentor too, teaching me like, this is what your values are actually. And maybe they're not, I had to do an inventory on myself. I had to like really assess myself, but like with someone else, get her to help me look at what is the truth of who I am? What are the wrongs that I've done? What are the rights? What are my actual feelings on things? And like, it was through taking an honest appraisal of myself that I started to discover myself. And, going through all of that also like made me aware that like maybe all of this happened because I'm meant to be there for others that are going through things. And maybe my struggles happened so that I could help someone else. My ability to sit with others and their pain is like unmatched, honestly. Like I have the ability to do that and to listen and to with my full heart and self, So I think it was a slow process. It didn't come immediately. I had to learn what felt good, what didn't, and like really pay attention to that. And like, why didn't it feel good? Was it because I was conditioned to believe that, or because I actually felt bad about it? If I found myself ruminating on things, maybe there was something wrong in how my actions were and what my beliefs are. So that's kind of how I started to figure that out. I think becoming who I am today has been like a deliberate, conscious choice every single day, and like small little choices that I've had to make that didn't happen overnight. It's been a long process, and I'm still in the process of continuing to grow and transform.
You talked about the concept of patience, and you shared just in your story there about having to sit through patience, and you were wondering kind of why you had to have that patience. That's something that I struggle with a lot myself. And do you find that even in your day-to-day life now that you find yourself in periods of patience? And what does finding yourself in those periods of patience allow you to do or make you think?
So I think in our society, we're like kind of programmed to have this need for instant gratification for everything. And then as an addict too, that quick fix, that remedy, learning how to sit through all of those emotions and those feelings and this waiting, right? Like I've had a lot of waiting periods, and I've heard that term patience so much in my recovery. And for a long time, I hated it. So I'm like, oh, I hate that. Like I want it now, and I want to see results now. It's been in those moments where I've had to cultivate patience and wait, right? That has actually allowed me to connect with a power greater than myself, to be honest, and to allow things to unfold that in a way that actually benefited me and others around me in a way that probably wouldn't have if I would have rushed things. I think it's been about humility, to be honest. Like I've had to learn how to be humble in this waiting. Like I'm not in control. The universe will do what it does. I can ride this wave and flow with the universe, or I can try to control everything, but I'm not in control. So it's just anxiety and fear, and I don't know, patience has been one of my greatest gifts that I've been given.
You were talking a little bit in your story there, a little bit how you've had to develop some routines, and you were talking about meditation and praying. Have you had to really be intentional? About creating that daily habit? And how have you found that creating that daily habit has benefited you and benefited the people around you?
So I've had to actually practice it every day. I started in early recovery when I noticed how turbulent my emotions were. Very big emotions that I didn't know how to handle, and just swinging from back and forth, like all day, especially my anger issues and stuff like that. So I had to make an intentional choice. Like I need to meditate and I need to pray. And I didn't see results right away, obviously. Like I thought it was going to be an instantaneous thing, but it came very slowly. People have commented on it, how the peace I bring to situations and my calmness, but that's actually from me actually training my nervous system to relax and to be present. So it's allowed me to be more present over time. It's also like cleared away that chatter in my mind that continuously just goes, right? So I can actually enjoy life and live in the now without being burdened by the past or the future. It's allowed me to start responding rather than reacting to situations, which is something that was like very monumental for me. I was always reacting to life and to situations and to people, and to take my power back in that way has been amazing. Meditation has calmed me a lot, and I can tell when I don't do it. One day of missing it and I'm like moody and reacting to life. And so that prayer meditation, I start my day off every day with that and reading something inspirational, affirmations, things like that. And my day goes much smoother. I am able to actually have tolerance for people and practice my values, instead of going against them because in a moment where I'm reacting.
You touched on something there that I really want to dive into a little bit here. You said your values, and is that something around your values, your morals, and your character that you really had to reassess and rebuild? Is that an area that you found you almost had to rebuild your pillars from where you were to where you are now?
One of those things I would say is like my idea of what love is and unconditional love. That was a big deal for me because growing up, I've been taught like love is conditional. Love is, and one of my big values is like loving others and serving others. So, it wasn't always like that. I was very selfish. I cared only about myself, what I could get from people and from life. So this idea that maybe love doesn't have to be conditional, maybe that contrast, maybe growing up, I learned all of that and went through that conditional love because I'm meant to be a source of unconditional love for not only others, but for myself too. Because that was a big deal for me. Like I did not know how to unconditionally accept and love myself in my perfections and flaws, so that's been a big monumental piece in my journey is learning what love really is and what it's not. And how can I show up for others in that way that reflects what I believe unconditional love to be? I don't believe unconditional love is accepting just every single thing a person does and allowing it to continue. You know what I mean? That's codependency or lack of boundaries. Unconditional love for me is like accepting that people make mistakes and that, no one is perfect. And to even myself is like that perfection, really that idea that I need to be perfect and liked and approved of by everyone is just, I just need to like myself and love myself. That's it, right? Like and same for others. Like that's what we crave as humans, like that love.
I want to dive into an area that might be a little bit difficult. And I apologize if it is. We don't have to dive down, but I'm really curious to know in your travels through recovery, how has it changed your relationship with your son and your mindset around being a mother? How have you been able to travel and I guess create a better world for yourself and your son and become a mother through everything you've been through?
I think it all started with realizing that my actions and my lack of presence was creating the exact same situation that I had went through as a kid, basically the same feelings of not being accepted or worthy of love, that my addiction basically was doing that to my son. For starters, like I started to become more present for my kid and trying to actually connect and get to know him, and learn like that concept of practicing that unconditional love and forgiveness. Cause that was another big thing that I learned in recovery was forgiveness. And I genuinely thought I was a very forgiving person. Now I can see how like every day is a new day. And with my son, I try to practice that like every day is a new day. Also teaching him what I was lacking, that those coping skills, I'd have my son in therapy. He sees a psychologist. So do I. I don't deny what I've put him through. We openly talk about it with each other. I try to be there for him and to expand his support system. I think it's changed the way I show up in a lot of ways, but mostly in the way we connect. I have so much love and respect for him. And I now see that like, I'm not just his greatest teacher. He's actually my greatest teacher. That's actually the truth. He has opened my eyes to so much beauty in the world. He went through all of this loss at 9 years old. He also went through all this with me. Like he lost my brother, was so close to him, right? So he lost his dad, and he tells me like, Mom, all we really have is today, and telling me like, well, we got to love him while he was here, and all we can do is love each other now. And, at least we have each other to carry us through these, so he's just a really old soul and like has this depth about him. He meditates, he prays with me, it's created this really strong bond that wouldn't have been possible if we hadn't went through all of that together. So, everything happens for a reason,
I truly believe that everything, everybody that you run into in your life, every person that, whether they are in your life for an extended period of time or a short period of time, you get to make these connections for a reason. It's a belief that has stuck with me my entire life that I have had people that come and go, people that I have known my entire life, people that I've known for 5 minutes and had small experience. Everything happens for a reason. It's all connected. Sometimes we'd like to know a little bit more why, and we'd like to have a few more answers. That'd be great. But it's all in part. It's this wild experience of life that we get to ride. I love, your son sounds, like you were saying, an absolute old soul that I can't imagine where he's going to go. With a mindset like that at 9, I wish I had a mindset like that at 9. I really would be curious to know if you could go back and say, tell your 9-year-old self any lesson you wanted, what would you tell your 9-year-old self? If you could go back and talk to your younger self, what's a lesson you'd share?
I think I would tell myself it's going to be okay. Trust the process. You'll end up where you're meant to. And it is all happening for a reason. And in the end, all that matters is love. Because really, that's what connects us all, right? I think everything happened to get me exactly where I'm meant to be right now. And I wouldn't want to change that. But some sort of comfort for 9-year-old me would be great. To understand that I'm not going through it for nothing. It's all happening for a purpose. And one day you will see why.
And now, Esther, I would love for you to share with our audience what it is that you have just recently applied for. You have taken a giant leap. Where are you going?
So I have so far completed 4 years of my degree towards becoming a psychologist. I just finished applying for my master's degree. Yeah, my goal is to become a psychologist so that instead of just covering these bullet holes with a Band-Aid, I can get to the root of why, what's under that bullet hole, what's going on, and start actually helping people heal that want to get help. Psychology changed my life and it's been a big tool for me. And I hope to be able to give back in that way by being able to sit with other people in their pain and their complex grief and help them navigate that. So I'm really, really excited. This is a big leap for me. I'm leaping out into the unknown. I know it's a lot to come from that to now trying to become a psychologist. I have great faith in the universe and I'll end up where I'm meant to be.
So this seems like a great place to bring our conversation full circle. And at the end of every single one of my podcasts, I like to pose a really deep, powerful question. So Esther, I pose to you the question, what is your definition of truly living your best life?
For me, my definition of truly living my best life is to be, let me think on that. My best life is to be following my purpose and my passion, to be in the flow, my purpose. That's living my best life. When I'm in my purpose and I'm helping others and making a difference and showing up with love and purpose and intention, that is living my best life. And I don't know where that will take me or what that means exactly. But I know that whatever my higher powers will for me, it is to make the world a better place. And even if it's just some small corner of the world, there are people who need my light out there that I hope that I can impact, even just by sharing my story, and I can rest easy when the ripples of my love and my hope reach others. So yeah.
And I want to just say that in even the short time that we got to work together, your light does shine through and you are showing up in every experience that I got to have with you, changing people's lives already. I know for a fact that you are going to just go incredible places and be this incredible rising phoenix to lift people out of their fire like you did yourself. So Esther, thank you so much for joining us. It has been one of the most incredible conversations that I've had the honor of sitting through. So thank you so much for sharing with us.
Thank you, Bryan. It's been such a privilege.
That's a wrap on today's episode. A heartfelt thank you to our guests for showing up with honesty, depth, and wisdom. And thank you for listening in. I hope something in this conversation stirred something in you, a memory, a reminder, or maybe even a return to a part of yourself that's been waiting. If you enjoyed this episode, can I ask a quick 30-second favor? Share it with someone you know, someone who might need to hear this message too. And don't forget to explore past episodes. There's so much more waiting for you there. Until next time, I'm your host, Bryan White, and this is The Return Project.